Ah, the Woofer. If mod support ever gets added for Save the World, then honestly, somebody needs to sync up a dog barking every single time you pull the trigger on this weapon, because I think that'd be hilarious. I never covered this weapon before for one main reason, and that is that, okay, this is a good weapon. It's a strong weapon. It's got area of effect damage. It's a good shotgun. Seriously, don't let anything I'm about to say take away from it. It's just the fact that the Pulsar 9000 beats it in every way. Damage, fire rate, range, area of effect, reload speed, all of the ways. It even has 5 shots before it has to reload instead of 4. The difference being that it takes energy cells, and not just energy cells, but 4 energy cells per shot. Yeah, the Pulsar 9000 makes you pay for all that performance. So the Woofer is really closer to its cheaper cousin, and that actually makes it a pretty viable weapon, seeing as you're not only just using 1 shell per shot, but you're using shotgun shells. So it's actually a pretty affordable weapon to operate. So the Woofer, as I said, is really good at crowd clearing. That's kind of its main thing. Its single target damage is okay. I'm running a crit build on this, or that's at least the copy that was given to me. We'll explain why you might not want to do that in a little bit here, and you're kind of seeing it probably, where if it doesn't crit, it's kind of and if it does crit, it hits for a ton. That's kind of all crit builds explained in a nutshell right there, but its main feature is crowd clearing. You want to bring this thing into an encampment, and you will cleave through hordes of zombies with ease. Any weapon where you can pull the trigger and hit multiple enemies at once is going to be pretty effective in that area of effect damage regardless, so that's kind of its main niche, and that's sort of what all the sound weapons are good for. In the copy I think I was given, or at least a copy that I have, stunning or knocking back an enemy will cause the nearby enemies to dance, and that's kind of unique to the Boombox weapons. So along with all of the other Boombox weapons, they actually all in general have a pretty high impact that they actually trade for damage, and that's kind of where the Pulsar beats it out a bit. So the Woofer is no exception. It is very good at impacting those enemies, knocking them back, knocking them down. That even takes place against mist monsters, which gives you lots of extra time to attack an enemy, especially when they're zapping you in the face. So even though it doesn't have a ton of damage, its impact makes it pretty usable, especially on those bigger targets. Now, with all of that said, now that you kind of know about the weapon and how to use it, the best perks for this thing are kind of interesting. So, as I mentioned, we did run a crit build on this, at least in the one that I use. I do think reload is sort of a cornerstone. So, of all the things I'm about to recommend, a reload perk is pretty much something that you do not want to miss out on, because that's going to help a lot. But we did run a crit build. It does have a base 15% crit chance, so a 43% chance to crit wouldn't be bad with a maxed out copy. And I do want to mention something interesting that sort of comes up in 2 ways. And one, I never really recommend an impact perk, but if you have something like this, a 6 perk where stunning or knocking back an enemy will cause them to dance, then an impact perk might actually help you with that, although you will be trading a little bit of damage, so tread carefully there. And of course, down here, if you want to run crit rating crit damage, you can. Crit rating crit damage reload is probably sort of the best all-around way to go. The bottom perk here could be crit damage, which would be probably nice if you want to spec all the way into crit damage. Damage, which I think would probably be best all around to smoothen out the output, or damage to dancing enemies. And that's where I think things get a little bit tricky, because you cannot make mist monsters dance, so they are going to be your hardest targets and where you definitely want a crit build. But like I said, crowds of enemies are certainly your bread and butter, and lots of them will be dancing if you're eliminating them, knocking them back, etc. So to have, I think this goes up to 60% extra damage against those enemies would be very, very effective, but you would be contingent on them, of course, being dancing in the first place. So it is 60% extra damage, but you're getting a little bit of trade-off there. So to summarize what I just said, reload speed, definitely. I don't think you would want to use this without a reload perk. And then crit damage is probably what I'd recommend if you're going to be running a crit build on this. Crit rating crit damage is pretty standard, because it's doing pretty okay damage even when it doesn't crit. It's low, but another shot is always here to follow up. And then, of course, if you really don't like crit builds, then, of course, you can just go, like, triple damage on this. That wouldn't actually be that bad. It's like 9 to 20% less overall total damage output, but it would be a lot more consistent, as you wouldn't be relying on crits. And then, of course, if you want to roll a crit build or a double damage build, you can always consider that dancing enemies perk at the bottom. That sort of depends on your copy, because stunning an enemy or hitting the same target 6 times, I think that was another copy that I saw, or eliminating an enemy, I prefer that one, I think, personally, because eliminating an enemy is a good way to guarantee that you're going to have dancing enemies around you. But stunning or knocking back an enemy can, trigger on multiple enemies at the same time, so maybe there's a little bit of trade-off there. It really depends on the perk that you have and how your playstyle will mix with that perk. That will really factor into whether or not you actually want to use that. And then as my final point, I will recommend, if you don't want to do the dancing enemies, potentially considering a damage perk, because you can roll reload, crit rating, crit damage, and then having that extra damage perk would in average be like about 10 to maybe 20% less overall DPS. I mean, a crit damage perk does add quite a lot of extra performance, but that damage perk will smoothen out your performance all around, so there's a little bit of trade-off there. If you want to go total maximum damage output, you can go crit rating, double crit damage, and not even think twice. If you want to go ahead and make your performance a little bit more consistent, and potentially you're leaving enemies at like near death HP if you don't crit, you might want to add a damage perk, and it would allow you to one-shot the smaller enemies while still doing okay damage against the big guys. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but of course you can go every element on this. I'll link my elements guide in the description below if you guys want to figure out what you want to do here. That just about wraps up the Woofer though, you guys. If you want to support the channel, feel free to use code Mista to check out. Become a channel member here if you guys want to get all these lovely perks right on there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a nice day. And then